Hello everybody, my name is Asya Volodina, I'm from Moscow, and today we have a talk together with my friend Elena Ashmarina from Yekaterinburg. You'll see her a little bit later. We will talk to you about Russian mechanics in our LARPs. Initially it was supposed to be a 2-hour-long talk with some practical part, but we have, as you can see, just half an hour. So we definitely have no time to tell you about everything we wanted, and we will be a little bit tight. So please feel free to ask us later about this or to ask in comments. Actually, last years I had several talks about Russian LARPs, about mechanics in Russian LARPs from different point of view. So today it was supposed to be some relaxed talk about some great examples I want to give you. First, to inspire you, and second, to glorify some of my friends, colleagues, LARP writers in Russia. But before telling about this great, from my point of view, from our point of view, mechanics, I want to say a couple words about what do I feel as this great mechanics, what is good for mechanics. First, this is maybe the main thing. I think that every great mechanic should correspond to the idea of LARP. Every LARP has some core idea, core main thing, game focus. What is all this about? It can be some question, some philosophical question. It can be some topic. Or it can be just, I want to immerse into some historical period or setting. It can be also just, I want to have fun with friends. But to have the honest answer for yourself, what is all this about, is a good way to make conscious game design. Of course, this thing is good not just for game mechanics, but for every element of game design. So, what is specific for mechanics? Mechanics for the LARP are made to or add something to the reality, to make some new part of the reality, or to highlight some part of this reality. And it's really great when this is done first, equally for every player, this highlighting or adding, and second, when it enriches the play process, when it gives new stories, or when it forms new connections between characters. Let us, for example, take some super simple example. For example, fighting mechanic, let's say hits. So every character has several hits, they can be removed, so character can be injured if some in-game weapon touches some parts of body of the player. Why is it actually good mechanic? First, it highlights some part of the reality. Every character actually has body, this body can be injured. First, it's equally for every character, for every player, so you definitely know that it can be done, that everybody can be injured, or that everybody can actually do this. Of course, in different ways based on personality or characteristics of this character, but still. And second, of course, it enriches some game process. First, it gives you some particular stories around this. Second, it gives you a new channel of communication, this fighting communication between characters. Does this mechanic correspond to the idea of LARP? Unfortunately, there are some LARP writers who think that it's really good for every LARP. Of course, it's not like this. But if you have some immersive LARP about the setting where this fighting is really important, and you want to give your players this not just narrative but also physical immersive experience, and you want for in-game there was not so clear what will be the result of every fight, it's not the worst idea to use this one. Let's take another example. For example, you have LARP about dystopian LARP, where there is some part of characters that have weapons and can absolutely dominate over another one part of characters. Then you can go with just simple mechanic like some characters have weapons, and if this character points another character and says, like, I'm killing you, the second one is killed. Is this a good one? It's also a good one. This one even doesn't just highlight some part of the reality, but even add something to our reality, at least. It's the reality of this ultimate domination. Is it equally for every player? It is. It shows to every player how it works in this world. And third, of course, it creates some stories around this. But as you can see, these stories will be a little bit different from the first example. I think you got somehow my thesis about what is a good mechanic from my today's point of view. So let's talk about these cool examples. First mechanic I want to mention today is the mechanic of everything on music. In a way, I'm talking about this now. It was first used on a LARP Atlantis. It was a LARP about a small mysterious city where almost every character just came in the beginning of the LARP for different reasons. How it was done? Every player on the wrist had a bracelet which was a player. So in this player, music player, there was a list of tracks. Most of them were emotional tracks, and it was pre-written by the player for every character. Like, this track is happiness of my character, this track is sadness of my character, this one is anger of my character, and so on. And also there was white noise. All the LARP long, every player had one earphone in the ear, and usually it was just white noise in that, but sometimes when some character was close to her, or when this character came to some particular place, suddenly she heard some particular emotional track in it. These connections between characters and places were pre-written by organizers and were not known to players in advance. Like this, they could explore the world of the LARP and also form new connections or explore connections between their characters right in LARP. Of course, all other mechanics were also based on music in some way. For example, fighting mechanic. If two characters wanted to fight, the players found the track of fight in their bracelet. Usually there were several tracks like this in every bracelet, and then simultaneously they pressed the button on. So the track started to play. One had one soundtrack in her ear, another one, and they theatrically started to fight. Then at some point this track finished, and that character whose soundtrack finished first fell down, and it was supposed that this character lost this fight. The length of these tracks were also pre-written by organizer, first based on what character was it. For example, a war veteran from Vietnam had, of course, longer tracks than some hippie girl usually. And also there were some random for when you had several tracks in your bracelet, there were several length tracks. So, based on character and based on some random. This was first cool for people who observed this fight, because it was theatrical, pretty beautiful, and for those who were involved in this fight, it was pretty emotional, because soundtrack of something always helps you. Of course, you can use not so technologically demanding ways of using music in your LARPs. The same organizer group on some of their previous LARP had another one mechanic. Every player there also had some player, but they didn't have to listen for it all the time. But every track and the players had some name, some hashtag. In LARP, they could meet these hashtags somewhere surrounding, somewhere in the world. For example, it can be written on a wall or on some object. And when you saw this hashtag somewhere around, it was narrative of game thing. You, as a player, press the button on and listen to this soundtrack for this particular place or this particular object. Of course, all this music thing is really cool, but not so often used thing, because, as I already said, it's quite technically demanding. Another one mechanic I want to mention today was super popular in our LARPs several years ago. It is still used in many of them, but several years ago it was just everywhere. And why it was like this? Because it lets you program many events without using first any technical stuff, and second, without communication in LARP with organizers or NPCs. The name of this mechanics is Cards of Ascult. Ascult is a name of organizer who invented this mechanic, and first LARPs where this mechanic was used were Frontier and Varmia of Ascult. First, they were invented for medicine, for medical mechanic. But then they were also used for rules about destiny, for flashbacks, for science, whatever. The idea is, let's say some character goes out of her house and goes into jungle. In this jungle, she finds a fruit, some unknown fruit with some unknown virus on this fruit. How does player know that there is a virus on it? She sees this card and takes this card and goes after instructions. The card is usually laminated card with several lines on it, covered with black duct tape, and some short instructions on the top. For example, if you touched this fruit, open the line 1. If you ate this fruit in 10 minutes, open the line 2. When player opens the line, she says the next instructions. It can be something about how or when should she open other lines, or whatever, or how the character feels, or what does she want to do, whatever. Then there can be other triggers, and based on other triggers, there can be other lines opened. I think you see what I mean. Based on this, you can make the tree of consequences of any complexity. And the trigger can be also like any trigger. Did she eat or not some medicine? Does the character have allergy or not? Did she came from Mars within 14 days? Whatever. This mechanic can be used for many different ways. Usually when there is some complex truth about the world, which is unknown to organizers but is covered from players and characters. And it lets in-game explore the world, explore the consequences in different ways without communicating to organizer. For example, it can be used for the LARP where different characters have different infections by zombie bites, or not infected, or they can be cured by different medicines or not. Also, it can be used for flashbacks. When you see, hear, experience something, open this and remember something about your character. Also, it can be used for mechanic of destiny, like Greek destiny, when based on how your character did something, there will be different destiny upon her. I think the popularity of this mechanic, based on it, actually corresponds to how we in Russia do like to play. We like things to happen to us. We like to immerse really deeply into character and look from her point of view to all this reality, and together with her fight against destiny, together with her explore the world. It's a very immersive way of playing. But of course we have also many more narrative mechanics. And about them, Lena will tell you now. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Elena Ashmarina. I'm from Yekaterinburg, Russia. It's in the Urals, and I consider myself belonging to the Ural Symbolic School of Larps. It also calls Mystery School. I will continue the story about interesting mechanics in our larps after Asya. And my first mechanic I want to tell you about is the soul mechanic from the larp Spirited Away in the Shell. This was a larp based on Neil Gaiman's American Gods and the Spirited Away cartoon about spirits, gods, as well as the human world in their mutual influence and interaction. In this LARP, every character had a body and a soul. They were played by two different players. In the world of a living, a person makes decisions, but the soul can whisper something in her ear, pushing her to action. But in the world of spirits, it worked in the opposite direction. The soul in the world of the living looks like a black cloak with a mask from the movie Spirited Away, and a living person cannot interact with it. The body is more active and more free, but souls can work together to make up trials or stories for their bodies. They are like movie directors. They stay behind the scenes, but then can decide what will happen then. At a crucial moment, they can even directly order the body to take a specific action. But it must be very important for the development of the character's story. Only very important, of course. In the world of spirits, the soul makes a decision to take side of one of the gods. This affects the way in which the history of the world unfolds and what happened in it. This mechanic greatly enriched the game for the characters. Of course, the game of the body became more intense thanks to the soul. You can say it became more vibrant and colorful. The soul is generally in a creative and meta-plane position, which is on the hand is dependent on the body, but shows where it will go, and the body chooses how. Also, it gave a lot. This mechanic gave a lot of new emotional experience from unity, support, and being together. And finally, it united worlds in a person of the spirits and the living, which was important to the idea of the LARP as a whole. And next, I will tell you about the barks mechanic from Heart of the Storm LARP. This LARP was a LARP about the post-apocalypse and cultural degradation, as well as about generational change. Every player lived many lives in a single LARP. And the process of moving from one life to another looked like creating a new costume for yourself from the things that have been brought in at once and put into the box. This process took only 30 minutes, and it was necessary to cut off something from one piece of clothing and sew it to the another. And after death, the costume returned back to the box. And when a new player took it and could use it again, therefore, the further the more unnatural people looked, because objects they used several times and degraded along with its civilization. Also, creating a costume was the process of inventing your personality, attitude to the world, and the character as a whole. For example, a pink suit with a Panama hat, which shields you from the outside world, led to a closed and quiet character who accumulated irritation inside. But if it broke through, then everything would fly around strongly. Is evidenced by a large hole covered by the front end. Of course, this is an exaggerated example, but it shows the connection of the material world and the character, and the construction of a new character from seemingly simple clothes. It also changed the whole aesthetics of the world, not towards the fantasy of apocalypse, but in a more convincing way. And in the end of our talk, let me briefly introduce you several examples of how different can be a mechanic for presenting the same part of reality in different LARPs. In our oral symbolic school, we consider this as so important as the death is. And I'm talking about sex. I'll tell you some mechanics of sex that are in our LARPs. I will move from the body to narrative. First, it could be the massage. That said, it can be a back massage, or you can just massage each of the fingers. Really pleasant. A very common mechanic in classic field-based LARPs. Next, it is searching for safety pins on another person's clothes, of course. It all depends on where the partner located them, on a color or underwear, for example. And this is an important issue of establishment of boundaries in the game with the mechanic. Next, it is drawing on each other's bodies. Before I tried, I didn't understand how pleasant it is. It was applied at the Renaissance era based LARP, as the embodiment of the idea of painting by Renaissance masters. The choice of the area, the body of drawing also sets the boundaries very well. Next, interesting, selfies. Selfies, it's they're from a LARP called Life Course. It was a world of the reality show. You need to take a picture of the interlocking of your fingers and then send the photos to the blog. A kind of mix of body and narrative, and information immediately becomes public. Next, picture cards from the LARP about witches, exchanging of cards on which you can write your own wishes, and of course it could be special prepared cards, for example with a erotic photo session in the style of LARP, for example. One of my favorite mechanics that is incredibly elegant. Sex, especially for versions from the LARP about the girls' boarding school from the early 20th century, named Smolny Institute. The most important rule was if you don't know how it's done, ask how to do it. If you don't know, you don't know. The most of the pupils did not know, of course. And the process itself looked like this. A woman must take off her apron. If this is her first time, then the man should have explained to her what to do next. She should raise her skirt, under which there should be a lower skirt or drawers. And then she should sit in a frivolous pose. After that, the man talked to her in a manner he deemed appropriate. A man cannot touch women or her clothes in the process. The man also must take off a piece of outer garments. I liked it. I like that game masters of the LARP consulted with a psychologist in the process of writing the mechanic, because this is a hidden mechanic, you know, which not everyone knows about. And what's important also, the stop word was clearly indicated. It wasn't a word really. It was a gesture of a slap to the face by the woman. After that, sex stopped immediately. Our opinion is that the sex mechanic should correspond to the main idea of the LARP and be unique, like any mechanic really, ideally. And as Asya said before, it's a good way to make game design conscious. I'm always excited inventing such elements, and wish you also be excited creating your LARPs from your heart. With that, glad to tell you about these mechanics. Don't hesitate to ask more about them or other examples. Thank you for your attention, and be safe, of course. Goodbye.